What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Chris Meaney here with you. Another edition of Mean Streets, live on our FTN Network YouTube page. If you guys are hanging out live, answer any starter sit questions that you guys do have today. If you could do me a solid and smash the like button if you're watching or listening on iTunes and Spotify. We greatly appreciate you guys rating, reviewing, subscribing, telling a friend, and also hopping on over to our FTN Network YouTube page and subscribing to our free channel. Lots of great content coming your way as we head into week 9 of the NFL season here tonight. And it could be a crazy week because there's a lot of very mediocre quarterbacks. There's a lot of game totals under 40. There's a lot of projections in the red already on my fantasy squads. We'll talk about some start and some sit players for week 9. We're going to tee up tonight's Thursday night football game between the Titans and the Steelers. Got a couple picks and a couple props. We'll dive into that in just a little bit. And of course, we'll be here to answer any questions. And if you are just watching the replay on this show, you can leave any comment, any question in the comment section. We'll circle back on these videos before kickoff tonight, before kickoff over the weekend. Tomorrow is the big day when it comes to practice reports. I will be with you guys tomorrow. A couple things happened to me last Friday. I will be here with you guys tomorrow to dive into all the practice reports, the injury reports, and we will address any starter sit questions that you guys have. We'll have some picks against the spread. A solid week last week in terms of straight up sides, just 13-3. We had a nice bounce back performance, and the spreads were pretty good as well. Just the 4 spreads on the wrong side of those 4. And the Chiefs certainly wasn't feeling a Denver Broncos win, but we do have a couple really nice matchups this week. Really a lot of great matchups. I mean, talk about Kansas City and Miami and 2 top 5 offenses, and Tua and of course, who's that guy? Oh yeah, it's Patty Mahomes. And that game happening in Germany. Then we have Dak and Hurts. This is just the second time that Dak has faced Jalen Hurts in the NFL. Last year when Philly played Dallas, didn't have Dak in game 1 of the season between those two teams. It was Cooper Rush, and then we didn't have Jalen Hurts in the second half of that game. It was Gardner Minshew. So those two teams going at it as well. And then, of course, we have Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals up against Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So those are like 3 of the best matchups that we could get. Are you kidding me? Like, those are 6 legit squads. And then we just have a lot of just randomness at the quarterback position this week. I tell you what, I don't know if this is I don't know what it is, to be honest with you. I think, I'd like to see more teams drafting a second quarterback, getting a capable backup in place, developing that backup. But when you're tossing out, 160, I mean, even $200 million to these quarterbacks, is tough for these backup guys to get first team reps and to get developed. But there's a lot of just a mediocre quarterbacks here today. And we're all in this together. So we'll walk through this. Starter sit questions and things like that. I want to give a shout out to the Texas Rangers off the top of the show. World Series champs last night, defeated Arizona. It was looking like maybe we'd get some drama in the late half of that game. And no hitter at one point there for Zach Gallen. And then Corey Seager gets the guys rolling again. I still am shocked that Corey Seager didn't get the Barry Bonds treatment of let's just walk this guy. Let's not have him beat us. I thought in game 4, the other night when there was 2 outs and a guy on third, what are you doing pitching to him? I mean, come on. He hits a 2-run shot and it's GG. It's all over. But Texas, 94 losses last season. I know a lot of people, they bought their team. They had the 4th highest payroll. Yeah, they spent some money, right? They spent some money over the past couple of years. And Simeon, who broke out in the World Series, and Corey Seager, who wins the World Series MVP and just the 4th guy to win multiple World Series MVPs, joins Gibson, Koufax, and Jackson, and of course one in the AL and the NL. But yeah, spent some money on those guys. But other guys stepped up, like Adolis Garcia was great. Had some nice young rookie players in there as well that have got a big game. Nate, right? A history of kind of showing up. That's why he's got the nickname. 5-0. I mean, Strasburg, I think, had 5 wins when the Nats won the World Series, but he wasn't 5-0, I don't believe. I think Nate was the first pitcher to go 5-0 throughout the entire postseason. So Texas spent some money. It didn't work out for them last year. Even DeGrom hardly played. DeGrom, I see the picture of Melvin Gordon with the Lombardi trophy, like, hey, finally won the Super Bowl last year with the Chiefs. It's kind of like DeGrom hanging out. He gave him a little bit at the start of the season. Acquiring Scherzer, obviously didn't work out for them last night or for in the World Series. Like even if throughout the playoffs, it didn't work out for them. But credit to Texas and Bruce Bochy, man, 6th manager to have 4 titles, just the 3rd to win in the AL and the NL, joining Sparky Anderson and Tony La Russa. So Texas gets it done. And let's be honest, it was a pretty boring World Series, was it not? I mean, it wasn't really competitive. Loved Arizona getting there on like 84 wins. It was a really cool story. Just 100 losses from them just a couple years ago. 2 of these teams were 2 of the worst teams in baseball, and it's just nice to see new blood, new faces. The Dodgers and the Braves and the Astros. Like it's just really nice to see new faces in there. Evan Carter had 4K last night, but my goodness, that guy looks like a real good player. Josh Young is a nice player as well. So fun baseball season. A shout out to the MLB crew. I saw the tweet this morning. Our guy Frank, 55.99 units. MLB Dream, 56.88 units. I had 43.9. Potential for 20 more. We do have Ronald Acuna Jr. at 10-1 to win the NL MVP, and I do believe he's going to get it. We also have Spencer Strider to win the NL MVP, and I don't think he's going to get that. I do believe Blake Snell will get that, but we're possible 10 to 20 units riding for us. So I'm pretty happy with how the MLB season went. Really strong on sides at 24 units. Props at 15 units. Totals at 5. Prop God, we had at 20 units, Josh Gross at 18, Hey Rosenberg at 32, and mid-major Matt checking in with 15 units. So a pretty strong showing for the MLB squad. And if you do have the FTN betting package, you get all picks across all sports from everybody. So just because MLB is over, you are going to get all picks, of course, from me, but from other people as well across the NFL. And I know the prop game has been extremely tough for me. I'm not an unders guy. I may have to adjust here in the second half of the season because I feel like I'm just missing on certain player props. I hold myself accountable all the time. It's not a great feeling giving loser player props, but the sides have been pretty solid for me, and I'm hoping that I can turn this thing around. But you get all the picks across all the sports, projections, tools. NBA is in full swing. I've seen a lot of people have some success already over at FTM Bets when it comes to the NBA props. Our guy Marshall is always laddering some things, and the NFL and the NBA models are fantastic with courtesy of Frank as well. And yeah, you get those projections, the tools, and the Discord channel, and the projections are up point from Jeff Ratcliffe. It's not too late to join the family. FTN batting package and the college basketball around the corner here, as well as Mike Randall and the team. We have Hoops with Noops twice a week on our FTN Network YouTube page, and he's giving some basketball picks. So a lot of betting content still out there for you guys across all of the sports here into November. But it was cool a couple days when seeing all the big four in the NHL and the MLB, the NFL, and the NBA. It was all happening, and it still is with college basketball around the corner as well, and then college football, of course. Just the other, I was kind of surprised that Georgia wasn't named ranked number 1. I was a little bit surprised there, but I'm sure Kirby and the crew are not too worried about it. Yes, smash like buttons. Let's go, smash them. Lutesta in the house. Happy Thursday, fam. We got some stuff here. Good morning, Daily Handle with Jordan Allen. Let's go. Welcome in Thursday Night Football. We'll get to some of these questions in just a little bit. I'd rather have ownership willing to spend the money win to win versus the line in their pockets. Yeah, the DFS crew is legit as well. I'll get to some of these questions in just a little bit. Just hang with me, guys. It's not going to be a super long show. I want to tee up tonight's Thursday Night Football game. I got some starter sits for you guys, and then we'll get into those questions to wrap up Mean Streets here today. So week 9 kicks off with the Titans and the Steelers. The Steelers checking in at -145. Use the prop shop and the parlay calculator to get the best possible number this week. It's one of several totals that check in at under 40, 36.5. Like, listen to some of these games this week. Minnesota and Atlanta, 37 total. Arizona, Cleveland, 37.5. The Rams and the Packers, 38.5. We have the Commanders and the Patriots at 40. We have the Bears and the Saints at 41. We have Tampa and Houston at 40. We have the Giants and the Raiders at 37. And then we have the Jets and the Chargers sitting at 40. It is a lot of low totals here. The scoring is down across the board in the NFL. I don't know if it's good defense mixed in with bad offense, but we'll talk about the quarterbacks that are playing this week in just a little bit. I put in the tracker on Tuesday afternoon, the Steelers at -2.5. I think that they win this game by a field goal. When I look at both of these teams, you view the Steelers defense as, I view it anyways, as a defense that's pretty solid. But when you look overall at some of these numbers, you see the Steelers defenses, they've really struggled against perimeter wide receivers. I mean, they've been great against tight ends all year, fourth fewest fantasy points to tight ends, but the third most yards per game, the ninth most passing yard. I can't talk. The ninth most passing yards per game, the sixth most rushing yards per game, the eighth most fantasy points to backs, the fourth most fantasy points to wide receivers. They're top 10 in yards per carry and yards per play allowed. Top 5 mark against opposing quarterbacks, right? So that really doesn't make sense. Like, they're giving up all these yards and fantasy points, but they have been stingy against opposing quarterbacks in terms of completion percentage. They're ninth in total DVOA defense, and they're ninth against the pass. When you look at Tennessee, they're top 10 in opposing quarterback completion percentage, but not in the good side, right? That would be really the bottom 10, but quarterbacks have been able to toss all over them. But this is an offense that doesn't want to be pass first. I don't know how much, Tomlin trusts Kenny Pickett, and he's going to be good to go here tonight, but they're not getting anything from Najee Harris, or they're getting certainly something from Jaylen Warren, but Warren does look like the better back, but Tomlin is just locked into Najee, and Najee continues to be the lead here. But it is a matchup where quarterbacks have tossed all over the secondary, top 10 in fantasy points to wide receivers, yards allowed to the position as well, yards per attempt. They're also great, like the Steelers, against tight ends. It's a bottom 10 matchup for Najee overall. The Titans are second in rush DVOA defense, but they are bottom 10 in pass DVOA. You see the total at 36.5. My goodness, that is such a low total. And I feel like this game is probably like a 17-14 game, but that is so low. And typically these Thursday night football games can get a little sloppy, and neither team really showing us a whole lot. I mean, last week was great for Will Levis. The 4 touchdowns was phenomenal. He hit Hopkins. He hit his guy. Atlanta was okay against, quarterbacks, and really stingy against wide receivers at the time. I think that this is just going to be a tougher test for him, even though those numbers that I rattled off, like the passing yards allowed and the yards allowed overall from the Steelers, and struggling against perimeter wide receivers. This is a team that can really bring pressure. They blitz a lot. They can get after the quarterback. And I think Will Levis he's going to have some moments. He can certainly air the ball out, right? And let's see if he can get this ball out quick. Maybe we see a couple screens to Henry and Tajay Spears. I don't believe we're going to see Treylon Burks up against, Porter Jr., who grades out really well for us in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. It's a really tough spot for him. And Henry should be able to run on the Steelers defense, but I think this is going to be a tough spot. And that's why I'm leaning with the Steelers at home in a field goal game. I'm going to stay away from the total. It's easy to kind of think low, like even just like a 14-13 game, a 17-14 game. It's kind of right there. But if there's any sort of defensive score, and it's possible, right, with the 2 quarterbacks at play this week, it's possible there is some sort of defensive score here. And Fitzpatrick is not going to play, I don't believe. So that does make things a little bit better for Levis maybe to hit some of his guys, but any defensive score and you're not going to get that total. It's just a really low total that I want to stay away from, but I think it's going to be, I think we're going to see like a 2017 game, and that's kind of right at that number. It would be over. That would be an over. Maybe we see a 17-14 type game, but I got this feeling about the Steelers. Just a couple props here I like, and just a couple. I'll start here with Deontay Johnson at over 57.5 receiving yards at -110. That's over at Bet365. In fact, I do see the prop shop right now hanging 56.5. Slightly juiced at -125. That's at PointsBet. But in 2 games since Deontay has returned to the lineup, 20 targets, 11 grabs, just over 160 yards, 70, and 85 the last couple of weeks. I mentioned the Titans, the 7th most points allowed from a fantasy standpoint, 2 wide receivers, but also 188 receiving yards per game, 2 wide receivers, which is inside the top 10. And I went back and looked at all the games and the wide receivers that they played. And they played some good ones. I think 3 have hit the century mark against the Titans, but there's been at least 1 wide receiver in every game but 1 with at least 73 receiving yards against them. And we know the Titans 25th in pass DVOA, according to football. Whoa. Almost did it. That would have been the first time I did it all year. It is not Football Outsiders anymore. It is Aaron Schatz and FTN Bets, FTN Fantasy, FTN Daily. You can get all the DVOA statistics that you want. over at FTN Bets and FTN Fantasy. That's just like a thing that has just recurred in my life in this business for the last 10 to 15 years, talking about DVOA defense, and happy to have Shats on the squad. But yeah, 25th in pass DVOA, according to FTN. And we have DJ projected for over 60 receiving yards. So I'm going with DJ here. I'd like to take Pickens. I'd lean DJ catches and receiving yards. I won't go with Pickens for catches, but he is a big play waiting to happen. And ever since he's entered the league, he's among the leaders in yards per catch and ADOT. So I don't know. He's kind of hovering right around this number as well, but I'm going to lead with Deontay here. I don't want to give too much here tonight because it could be just a really ugly game. And then I'm going to go out on a limb here and Will Levis over 9.5 rushing yards. Our prop shop for Will Levis, we have him projected for 14. He had 11 last week on 7 carries. I don't think there's going to be like really any design runs for Will Levis. You look at his first 3 years in college, over 400 rushing yards in the first 2 years at Penn State, just over 300 in the first year in Kentucky, and then just don't look at last year. But we have him, like I said, projected for 14.6 rushing yards, and I think I see a little bit of an edge here at Bet Rivers at -112 for over 9.5. And, DK's 10.5, juice to -125. Bet365 is 11.5, -130. So we can get this number here at 9.5. And you hope that, with that pressure, maybe there's some scrambling. He can run. I mean, he's not really known for it, but he can run. He definitely has a cannon. And if he can find some time in the pocket, he can maybe take a couple more shots at DeAndre Hopkins. That's it. That's all I'm looking at here today. I was looking at Okonkwo for a little bit. I would lean to yes on the receiving yards. The catch prop at 2.5. I'm just not too confident that he will get 3 grabs. But if the ball has to come out quick for Will Levis and the pressure, I mean, I just mentioned the Steelers are really good against tight ends. I'd like seeing Okonkwo get 5 targets, 4 grabs last week. And he even had a rushing attempt for 4 yards. But I know that's not a lot, the 5 and the 4, but the 4 catches is the second most that he's had. And the 5 targets are the second most that he's had as well. So Tannehill not really looking his way. I don't think there's anything concrete to say like young quarterbacks lean on tight ends. You see it sometimes, but it's not a lock. I know it's what people just tend to say in the industry, but I would say he's going to get another 4 or 5 targets here. So, the catch prop, as I mentioned, 2.5 at -130. It's not too bad, but the receiving yards at 23.5. I see a big edge as well with the prop shop and the parlay calculator. FanDuel at 23.5, -110, and then Bet Rivers at 26.5 at the same price at -110. I say he gets around 25 receiving yards, and I'd lean yes on the 3 catches. Smash all the overs. I mean, I don't think we're smashing all overs here today, but we are in the NHL. I'll tell you that. We're taking Quinn Hughes at over 2.5 shots. We're taking all the Canucks against the Sharks. But like I said, I'm in on the full unit on Deontay Johnson receiving yards. I'll lean to Pickens in receiving yards. I'm staying away from the running backs here today. And I would say like probably the best bet for me on the board is the Steelers to win this football game, to win it by a field goal, lean on their defense here, getting some pressure on a young, inexperienced quarterback. And, it's a tough environment to play in Pitt. We've seen the defense make some good plays, even though they're giving up some real big explosive plays through the air. They held the Ravens in check. I know that was a divisional game a couple weeks ago, but that one was in Pitt. The Ravens have really cruised all year long. So lean with Pitt, 2.5. Stay away from the total. I got this weird feeling that it may get over at the end. And we'll go with Will Levis over 9.5 rushing yards, Deontay over receiving yards, Pickens lean, and Okonkwo for the lean there as well. The tight ends, when you look at these tight end numbers and fantasy points against, I think some of them you just have to take with a grain of salt. That Clippers and Lakers, this is why I'm exhausted, because I was up watching that game and the Arizona and Anaheim game till like 3 a.m. my time. But yeah, that LA game was really good last night. Nice little fourth quarter run. LeBron turned back the clock there a little bit. I don't think there was probably something else I was going to say about this game, but I really kind of forget now. It doesn't matter. Check. It was Okonkwo. Maybe a little bit of Okonkwo. Oh, he was a tight end position. So when you look at some of these fantasy points against at the tight end position, for example, like the best team against tight ends last week was Baltimore, and McBride had a game. right? He popped off. Now the Ravens are allowing the fourth fewest fantasy points to tight ends. Get into McBride in a little bit, but now a matchup against Cleveland this week, allowing the fewest fantasy points. Some of these teams are good against tight ends, but some of them just, there's only a handful of good tight ends in the league. So, yeah, the Ravens are a great defense. The Browns are a really good defense. They got guys in the middle of the field that I respect. But it wouldn't be surprising if a tight end had 5 or 6 catches against the secondary because, like I said, you can't. Just the numbers are a little bit skewed there. I got some starter sit stuff here for you guys. Let's start with guys that I would start in Week 9. Dak Prescott in Philly against the Eagles at the Link. Dak has owned the NFC East. As I mentioned earlier, this is the only second matchup between Jalen Hurts and Dak Prescott. The Eagles have struggled this year against quarterbacks and wide receivers. They've allowed the 7th most passing yards per game, the 6th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, the most fantasy points to wide receivers. We saw Howell light them up last week. And Brandon Cooks is a really tough matchup against Darius Slay, and Michael Gallup up against Bradbury. CeeDee Lamb he's gonna have his way in this game. I still think that Cooks could be a sneaky little DFS play, or if you're in a deep league, in a 16-team league, I wouldn't be shocked. He's got touchdowns in back-to-back games. He's starting to trend up here a little bit. The Eagles have struggled all year long against quarterbacks, and that secondary is good. They were number 1 in pass DVOA last year, but they have struggled. I mean, the proof is right there. They have given up some big plays. They can stop the run, but I think Dak is going to sling it around the field, and I think he's going to have a pretty good day. In a week where there are a lot of mediocre quarterbacks, for example, Taylor Heineke against Jaron Hall, O'Connell against Daniel Jones, maybe PJ Walker against Clayton Tune, Jordan Love maybe against Bright Rippin, on top of Tyson Bagent, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Kenny Pickett, Gardner Minshew. My goodness, there are a lot of mediocre, just backup quarterbacks going this week. Good news for Derek Carr. Derek Carr is trending up. The matchup is right. And I think you can pick him up off the waiver wire and start him over a lot of the quarterbacks that I just mentioned. A lot of quarterbacks are dealing with injuries. Carr has three 100-yard games in a... Let's start that again. He has 3 games in a row with 300 yards passing. He's up against this Bears team. They've allowed the 3rd most passing yards per game, the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks, the 5th highest opposing quarterback completion rate, 7th in yards per attempt. They're big home favorites. The Saints have a really good defense. Not seeing a whole lot from Bagent. 6 yards per attempt, 3 picks in the couple games that he's had so far. So I think the defense could set up Derek Carr and company to put them in situations to score. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas scoring touchdowns. I think he's got 1. And the weapon that is Taysom Hill at the moment, running routes, throwing passes, rushing touchdowns in back-to-back games. Jamal Williams is healthy. Alvin Kamara is catching passes. So I think Derek Carr, I have him as a top 10 quarterback, and I have him as a start this week. Out of all the backup quarterbacks and some of the mediocre quarterbacks that are playing here today, and some of them in tough matchups this week in Week 9, I think the one that you can go to is Taylor Heineke. A matchup here against the Minnesota Vikings, again, going to a backup as well. And I think that the Falcons will be able to limit Minnesota's offense here. And the Vikings have allowed the 2nd highest quarterback completion rate to quarterbacks as well. So Heineke, let's see him. I think that he is better for this offense than Desmond Ridder. We'll see Drake London if he's ready to go. Kyle Pitts, like Heineke will throw the ball to some of these weapons. It's all about, will Arthur Smith allow him to throw the football, 40 times? Probably not. I'd say they still lean on their ground game here a little bit, but I have more faith in Tyler Heineke throwing the football to some of his weapons than I do Desmond Ridder, who's been okay this year, but he has struggled with some of the turnovers. Josh Jacobs, my goodness. The Raiders are dead last in rushing yards, but they just cleaned house. We may see a little bit of a spark here from Las Vegas and Josh Jacobs. And they fired McDaniels, which was, a long time coming. It was just such a brutal hire at the time. The Giants will bring out the best in any running back. They're top 10 in rushing yards allowed and fantasy points allowed to the running back position, the 3rd highest yards per carry mark to opposing running backs as well. I know that they're making the quarterback switch from Jimmy G to O'Connell. Let's see if they lean on Josh Jacobs in a good spot here for the league leader in rushing yards last year, who's been pretty much a bust in fantasy football. So I understand people maybe thinking about sitting him. Joe Mixon hasn't really been efficient over the past couple of years. A potential shootout in this game between the Bills and the Bengals on Sunday Night Football. I've said this a couple times. Bills Mafia has been all over me, but if there is a weakness in this on this Bills team, it is the rush defense. They've allowed the second highest yard per carry mark in the league. And Mixon is getting all of the touches. He's getting catches out of the backfield. He's getting all of the goal line work, a big share of the rushing attempts out of the backfield. So at least the volume is there for Joe Mixon. You hope that he finds the end zone. The Bills have given up some big rushing plays, and I'm not really sold on their defense. Rasul Douglas is a nice pickup, but ever since they lost Milano and they lost Tre'Davious White, they've given up some plays, right? They really could have lost on the final play of the game against the Giants. They did lose on the final play of the game against the Pats, and they almost lost last week on the final play of the game against the Bucks. So I like Joe Mixon here. Kareem Hunt against Arizona. This is a good spot. Arizona top 10 in rushing yards, the third most fantasy points to running backs. Ford is the lead. He returned last week. He closed out the game. It was a timeshare. Mixed in there was Pierre Strong as well, but I think we see a little bit more Ford. And I just think Hunt getting some goal line work lately, finding the end zone as a guy that you can put in as a flex play, because this is a really good spot. They're going to Clayton Tune, apparently. Kyler, maybe another week for Kyler. And just, I think that the Browns defense will put them in a really good situation, just like the Saints, maybe to score some points and bleed out the clock potentially here with Kareem Hunt. And I would start Jerome Ford. I think they're both certainly startable running backs this week. Amari Cooper, a decent game from him last week. Some targets and some catches. It's been very inconsistent showing for Amari Cooper this year. Sounds like Deshaun Watson has a chance to returning in this game. Even if it's not Deshaun Watson, I would roll out Amari Cooper. I almost called them the Diamondbacks. The Arizona Cardinals, 7th most yards allowed per game, and the third highest completion percentage to quarterbacks, and the second most fantasy points allowed to the wide receiver position. Garrett Wilson, I don't think that we're having any questions in this matchup for Garrett Wilson. Oh, I love the Heineke. I just saw George did that for us there on the board. But Garrett Wilson against the Chargers, the third most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, the highest quarterback completion rate in the NFL. And Zach Wilson, say what you want about him, but he's made a couple throws. This Jets defense is legit. We know that. They've made Mahomes and Allen and Hurts look silly at times. They've allowed a league high 7.8 yards per attempt. This is a good spot here for Garrett Wilson. And Zach is getting him the ball. So credit to Zach and credit for the Jets moving around Garrett Wilson all over the field. Nico Collins against Tampa Bay, top 10 in allowing points to wide receivers, fantasy points, that is, yards per attempt, top 10, quarterback completion percentage against, top 10, also fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks, top 10 as well. I like Jameel Dean, but he is among the leaders in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool in allowing yards allowed per route run covered out of all the corners this week. If you're looking for a dart throw, you've had some injuries to your wide receiver room. We'll get to some sits in a little bit. Demario Douglas against Washington, I think, is interesting with Kendrick Bourne down. We talked about him last week, and he did find the end zone again. Washington has allowed a league-high 18 passing touchdowns, the second most fantasy points to wide receivers, third in yards per attempt, fourth most yards overall, and passing yards. They just traded Sweat and Young. I get it. It's Mac Jones. It's New England. We're not trusting Juju. I don't like Hunter Henry. Maybe they lean on the two running backs here in a game that they potentially could be up in the fourth quarter. But Demario Douglas, I don't know if he can handle top coverage, but this is a spot where he may just be okay against the Commanders, and he's going to get a lot of targets. So he's a hot waiver wire pickup, and I'd consider him as a flex play depending on your situation. Dalton Kincaid is a top 7 tight end for me the rest of the way. The Bengals are allowing the most fantasy points to tight ends. I got Jake Ferguson here as well. The Eagles have struggled to tight ends. We saw Ferguson find the end zone last week. A couple dud games from him, but there were some really tough matchups. Dak is focusing in on Jake Ferguson, and I don't think they'll have a lot of success running the football against the Eagles. We saw a couple touchdowns early in the season against the Eagles. Hunter Henry had some moments. Hawkinson had some moments. So I do believe that Ferguson is a real possibility to score a touchdown this week. He is among the leaders in targets at the tight end position when it comes to red zone usage. And then Trey McBride is on this board. I mentioned last week the Ravens, a tough spot, but we wanted people to pick up Trey McBride. I have him ranked as a top 12 tight end despite the tough matchup, despite maybe not seeing Kyler and moving on from Dubs, who was really throwing to the tight end position. The Browns have only allowed 4 fantasy points per game to tight ends. But as I mentioned, Baltimore last week, and the fact that he did have a really good game, you hope it's Kyler and not Tune. But based on pure volume alone, I think McBride is a top 12 tight end the rest of the way. Here are some players that I would sit in week 9. Up at the top, not breaking any news here. And there are a lot of bad quarterbacks this week, but I would try to avoid Geno Smith against the Ravens if you could. Baltimore allowing the second fewest yards per game, the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, the fewest yards per attempt at just 4.6, the third fewest passing yards per game, only 5 passing touchdowns, the second best mark in football. Number 1 in total DVOA defense and number 1 in pass DVOA defense as well. And I would not play Tyler Lockett. There's been some inconsistent games from Tyler Lockett, but all the numbers that I just shared with you, fewest yards, passing yards, lowest quarterback completion percentage, fourth fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. And he's going to be up against Marlon Humphrey. And according to our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool, the 4th fewest yards per route run covered out of all the corners going this week. I would sit Tyler Lockett. Jordan Love's on this list. The matchup is okay, but I just can't trust this guy. Are you kidding me? He just hasn't looked good. He's among the basement dwellers in completion percentage and yards per attempt. Even when he was popping off at the start of the season with touchdowns, he still wasn't accurate. I just don't trust Jordan Love. I don't really see where the ceiling is, and I don't think you can trust Christian Watson at this moment. And I'll continue on with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I'm just not feeling the Packers here. Yeah, they're favored by 3.5 points, and Matthew Stafford may not play, but Aaron Jones is splitting with A.J. Dillon. I think A.J. Dillon is the goal line back. A.J. Dillon's had a couple games with some catches there in third down situations. The matchup is okay. Like it's fine, but I just would like people to find other options than the Green Bay Packers at this moment. Of course, Clayton Tune's on this board against Cleveland, but we're not rolling him out. Here's a player that you may be like, no. I got to start this guy. It's Tony Pollard. It's Tony Pollard against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I get sitting Tony Pollard would be tough. I have him ranked RB15, RB16. So it's possible that you have better matchups than Tony Pollard. The ceiling is extremely high. So sitting Tony Pollard for Darrell Henderson or any other average running back in a decent spot would probably be a mistake because of the ceiling. But let me tell you about this Philadelphia Eagles rush defense. They've only allowed 63 rushing yards per game. It's the best mark in football. 11 fantasy points per game to running backs. It's the best mark in football. Tony Pollard has 1 game with a touchdown. They came week 1 when they were up 40-0. Well, they won 40-0, but he got some run in that game in the second half. He only has 1 game with over 72 rushing yards. What he can do through the air and the fact that he is the goal line back and the explosiveness that he brings to the table is why I get playing him and starting him. And again, I have him as an RB2. I don't want people to go nuts here and, fill my DMs with Tony Pollard. He had 2 touchdowns and this aged well. I hope it does age well. I hope that Tony Pollard has a good game for you guys. But this isn't a good spot. And he hasn't been that great running the football. The Cowboys are among the basement dwellers again in rush DVOA. And the Eagles have the best rush DVOA defense in football. They can get after the quarterback and people are throwing on them. So I think this is more of a Dak, Ferguson, CD, maybe Cooks at moments type of game. Pollard catching some passes out of the backfield. I get it. You may have to start him, but you may not have to start him. You may be lucky. Maybe you have Jonathan Taylor. Like, here are some running backs. I want to share some running backs since we're on Tony Pollard. Here are some running backs that I have ranked ahead of him, and we can share some of our projections to kind of back this up. And of course, we will start up at the top because why not? Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, Joe Mixon, Raheem Mostert, good to go, Isaiah Pacheco. DeAndre Swift's in a tough spot too, but I would start him. Kenneth Walker, also in a tough spot, but I would start him. And I would play Rachaad White and James Cook. So there's a lot of backs there that I have over Tony Pollard. The only backs that I mentioned in our projections that are not ahead of Tony Pollard is Kenneth Walker and Rachaad White, along with James Cook. But I'd even consider, like, you just can't play Gus Edwards over him. Like, would I be surprised if Gus Edwards had a better fantasy game against who are they playing again? Oh yeah, no, I don't think I could do that. Oh yeah, Seattle. I couldn't do it, but I wouldn't be shocked. 10.4 fantasy points, and we have Pollard for 12.8 in a half-point setting. again, just wanted to dive in because it's a big name. I'm not just trying to get clicks here. I'm just thinking about the matchup. All the Chicago running backs against New Orleans. I'm talking Deontay Foreman, Roschon Johnson, and we saw Evans in there as well. I don't know if this is going to be a straight up timeshare. I think Evans got some run in the game against the Chargers because they were just behind. But this isn't a great spot. The fourth fewest fantasy points allowed to running backs. The Saints have been stingy all year. I don't think Chicago is going to really move the ball here, and that's why I have DJ Moore as a sit as well. The second best opposing quarterback completion percentage against at 57%. The Browns are number one among the leaders in just eliminating yards per carry and yards per attempt. We have Moore against Lattimore. I just can't trust the quarterback play at the moment. DJ Moore's got that high ceiling. He could pop off. It's kind of like Pollard, right? You have one or two catches and all of a sudden you're taking one to the house, and that could pay off for you in a big way. But there are a lot of different wide receivers in better spots this week. I'm a DJ Moore owner. I'm a Christian Watson owner. These guys are not touching my roster this week. And then Marquise Brown against Cleveland. Again, Tune potentially under center. Cleveland fewest yards, fewest passing yards, 55% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks, which is the best mark. Second in total DVOA defense, second in pass DVOA, and the fourth fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. So this is I know Hollywood had a touchdown last week in another tough spot as well. He'll probably get some targets, but I think you can, find some better options out there. And then Joshua Palmer is a guy that we've talked a lot about here on this show. He's had some pretty nice moments. Quiet last week, dealing with a knee injury. Now he has to deal with Sauce Gardner. And the Jets have allowed 16 fantasy points per game to wide receivers, which is the best mark in football. The fourth fewest yards per attempt. It is a tough spot for Justin Herbert as well. Cole Kmet against the Saints. Just talked about the struggles that I think Chicago will have this week in the Dome against the Saints and eliminating quarterbacks to really throw the football on that secondary, and they can get some pressure there as well. So we've seen some targets for Kmet, and I think he should be the safety valve there for Bajan, but I'm not rolling him out. I'm not rolling out Tyler Higbee. Don't know about the quarterback play, but for the most part, it's just been Kupp and Puka Nacua. And then I'm also not rolling out Dalton Schultz against Tampa Bay. I think the wide receivers are in a better spot. Tank Dell and Nico Collins there. Whew, that was a lot. We got a couple minutes here, and then we're going to get out of here. I got 5 minutes. I got another show I'm going to have to do here. So I do want to get to a couple more questions here, and then we'll bounce. So Kyle Woods grabbed AOC San Fran with T-Law on a bye, full PPR, -4. Well, negative all the points for the picks. Can I play him? Or JSN, Roschon, Warren, Spears? I would play... I'd probably play Warren or Roschon. I know I just talked about the tough spot, but I'd probably play Roschon. And just given the matches that you had. Yeah, I think Falcons D is a good play this week. Also, another league, we got need a quarterback, Danny Dimes, Watson, Sam Howell, Levis, Minshew on waivers, have Kyler and T-Law bye. I would lean with, if Watson plays, I would play Watson against Arizona. If not him, I would go with Minshew against Carolina. What else do we have here? We're not getting back into Taysom Hill, a top 5 tight end. No, he's not a top 5 tight end. He's a top 10 tight end. He's a top 10, but we're not playing him over good tight ends. NBA Rick, what's going on? Great seeing you this beautiful Thursday. Hope you're doing well as well. I'm playing Heineke in a parlay to honor Jake, plus 252 touchdowns. I think it costs us a top couple touchdowns there. Just curious, why do you like Hunt? I don't like Hunt over Ford. Ford is just an automatic start, right? We're starting Ford every week, right? So I just wanted to give some other people that people will have maybe a question about if they'll play him. And I would not play. No, he's getting utilized, Amari DiMercato. But, last week, 80 or 20 for 80? That's okay. The matchup is just as worse as it can get. So if you're in a tough spot, sure. But I would play Hunt over him. A little bit of worrisome. Yeah, Kenneth Walker, the matchup is really tough. I like the under in that game against Baltimore. Not 100% at the moment. And last week, Zach Charbonnet got a little bit of run. A little bit of worrisome for sure. He was a bust for me heading into the season. I could take that L. He's had a lot of touchdowns, but he hasn't been super efficient. I thought maybe the goal line work could get taken away, and I didn't think he'd get a lot of targets, but he's getting some. But I don't, I think you just continue to roll him out. Trade Jefferson, Goddard, and Montgomery for Kelsey and Pollard. Jefferson, Goddard, Montgomery. Yeah, I mean, you're trading two guys that are hurt. If you need wins right now, this helps you out. An upgrade, Kelsey, you're getting the best player in the deal at the moment. And with Kelsey and Pollard, I don't love the spot this week, but the matchups are really good down the stretch for Tony Pollard and Dak Prescott and company. I think Dak is a top 12 quarterback the rest of the way. You got through some of those tough matchups. So I think that Pollard, I think it's a good deal. If you're getting Kelsey and Pollard, I like that side of it. I like both sides, actually. I think this is a good deal for both teams. I would acquire Jefferson Montgomery if I didn't need wins right now, and you just could, afford to take on a little bit of risk there. Horrible PPR option. Christian Watson, Robinson, or Ford could drop one to get Tank Dell, Dotson, Palmer, or Henderson. I would roll with Ford. I would roll with Ford in that spot. I just don't think you can trust Watson and B-Rob. I mean, he's been game scripted out of some games here. I lean with Ford. I think he'll do enough in the matchup there. I think Henderson should be owned, and I do think Tank Dell maybe at this point over Christian Watson, but I'm willing to wait a week or two. Do you trust Romeo or teammate Jalen Romeo? It's I'm not doing Jalen Reed. Yeah, it kind of is my boy. I dropped him weeks ago, but I just don't trust Jordan Love. I mean, he's just brutal, man. If you're sitting quarterback Love and Aaron Jones, does that mean you would start AJ Dillon? I like AJ Dillon I don't like AJ Dillon that much, but I actually like him a little bit more than Aaron Jones. I'm different on that. Most people like Aaron Jones, catch a couple passes, but I think AJ is the goal line back there. And yeah, Green Bay could score, but not a lot. I don't care that Ripon could start. I mean, if we've watched this Packers offense, they're pathetic. I mean, they're brutal, man. They don't score against anybody. I think that they get like maybe 21 points max. So we could see AJ and Aaron be okay. The fact that I had them there for sits, maybe they are okay. Two desperate starts. I'm going back and forth. Hunt or Spears, Gabe or Deontay. Yeah, Gabe doesn't check out that well for us in our wide receiver cornerback matchup tool. I would go with Deontay over Gabe, and I like Hunt over Spears in that spot. Any touchdowns? I don't think we'll see a lot here today. I have Deontay for the receiving yards. I'll lean with Najee's going to get a rushing touchdown near the goal line, and I think that Pickens. I would go with Pickens and Najee for touchdowns on the other side, Henry, and I'll go outside the box and go with Conco for one, but I would be shocked if we saw 4 touchdowns tonight. You said it, San Fran, Superflex. Sorry, AOC plays. Gotcha. Giants, yeah. Yeah, got you there. And then, no. Dude, we got into this already about Mikey Vegas and Taysom Hill. We already did it this week. And Taysom Hill is a top 12 tight end, but he's not top 5. I mean, Mikey's out to lunch. I mean, he loves the Raiders. We know what he's all about. He loves the Raiders, but he's running routes. He has back-to-back games with a rushing touchdown. This week, I got Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, Goddard, Kincaid, Ferguson, Pitts over him. And then I have Taysom Hill. And there are tight ends that are on bye this week that would be ahead of those guys as well, like Kittle. So he's not top 5. He's top 10. He's top 10. Let's stop it with the top 5, man. And no more about Taysom Hill. For the tight end spot, here we go. I would play Ferguson. I think that there's a higher ceiling for him. Taysom Hill may score a rushing touchdown. He may have a catch. He may toss a bomb. He's been running around a little bit, but I have Ferguson. We have Ferguson for 7.5 and Taysom Hill for 7.1. We have Taysom Hill for 31 rushing yards, 8 receiving yards, and 0.35 for a rushing touchdown. We have Ferguson here for 4 catches and 37 receiving yards, and I think he finds the end zone against the Eagles. Guys, I got to get out of here. I got to jump on another show. Appreciate all the support hanging out with me here. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow's a huge day. We'll have some practice reports. We'll dive into some more starter sits. We'll have some props for the weekend. We'll have some picks against the spread. And then we got one more here on the way out. Oh, so I think we answered that one already. I like the Kelsey and Pollard side, but I think it's a good deal for both squads. And I would only take the Jefferson and Montgomery side if I was comfortably in a playoff spot at the moment, because you're taking on a lot of risk there. But you can afford to take that on if it looks like you are on the way to the playoffs. All right, guys, enjoy the football game. Steelers win 2.5. Will Levis over rushing yards. Deontay Johnson over receiving yards. And we will be back tomorrow. Cheers.